All right, everyone, welcome to our next panel, Partnerships That Produce Results. In our last panel, we heard about some of the amazing work you all have done thus far. In this next panel, we're going to learn about a similar but different college access initiative that I think has some really great lessons learned for all of us. Now, raise your hand if you've ever heard of Connect Home. Oh, okay. A lot of you, because a lot of you are also Connect Home sites. Well, as many of you know, Connect Home is originally a HUD initiative through which HUD worked with public and private sector partners to connect public housing residents to the internet and increase their digital literacy. And one of Connect Home's major partners was the College Board. And this partnership started out with the College Board using Connect Home as a mechanism to raise awareness of their various online tools that students can use when preparing for standardized tests or planning to apply to college. And we really wanted to highlight these tools for all of you. There are some great resources that you can use with your students, but the College Board and Connect Home partnership went beyond that. College Board partnered with local college access organizations to provide in-person counseling to public housing residents living in 6 different cities nationwide. And one of the sites they worked at was here in DC with the District of Columbia Housing Authority. So Angela and Byron will tell you about that work. Angela is now with the College Board, but was formerly with the College Success Foundation, a local college access nonprofit here in DC. And she has done what you all are doing now. She has been working with public housing students to help them prepare for and apply to college. So she has some great lessons learned. And then Byron is a leader at DCHA and does a lot with their resident services. So raise your hand if you think resident engagement can be hard. Yeah, so because people are busy. I mean, our families are working hard. They have kids. They do not have time. So we have to be innovative and creative and really make it worth their while to engage with us. So Byron has given a lot of thought to this, and DCHA has a really creative resident outreach system utilizing community navigators. So we'll dig into that model, what lessons learned we can gain from there as well. So Amber, if you want to kick us off, tell us a little about Connect Home and kind of how this partnership got started.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. So I saw most of you raise your hand, but a few didn't. So I'll go into what Connect Home USA is, formerly Connect Home. So as Tess mentioned, we were a public-private partnership out of HUD, out of the White House, really focused on how can we bridge the digital divide for public housing residents. You know, how can we bridge that gap to today's digital society and most of the opportunities that are moving online for the most vulnerable populations? And that started as really focusing on K-12. We've since expanded, but our original focus was how can we affect K-12 families? You know, how can we make public housing a platform for students to step out of generational poverty? So we began kind of as a tiger team within HUD and the White House, kind of putting together how do we execute on this? And I'll steal a phrase from one of our White House interns who started with us. He said the government has 3 levers. We can fund things, we can make laws, or we can ask for things. And that last lever is the hardest one to pull. And that was the one we were pulling. We are an unfunded program. So everything we have $70 million worth of stakeholder commitments, is all in kind. There's not federal funding tied to us at all. Everything's being given to us by great organizations like the College Board. And similarly, our communities aren't getting funding either. We're asking them to take this challenge with us, to meet us halfway in terms of getting these resources in front of their residents and helping it to increase the opportunity that they're given. So with that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the lessons learned. And you'll hear me talk about open source. We really believe in that phrasing, that everything should be open source. So a lot of these lessons learned I've gathered from communities there, and feel free to take them as you will. So I think this I actually got from Kim Cole, who works for DCHA: collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. That's our motto. If you think about the process we're trying to follow for K-12 families, it's getting them connected, it's getting them a device, it's getting them digital literacy training so that they know how to use the device and be safe online. It's getting the students access to educational resources like the College Board, like FAFSA, taking them through the process, getting them through graduation, getting them accepted to college, and getting them to college. So that's a long process, right? It's a lot of steps in there. Can it be done by one organization? Sure. Is that sustainable? No. So we wanted to make sure that we were engaging the right partners who all had the same mission of how do we help these families so that we can work together. Because we're unfunded, we're asking you to do it for free, and it's a lot of work. We know that public servants are often overworked, understaffed. So we want to make it as easy as possible to create those partnerships so that it continues in the future. All right, so I'm talking about 3 types of partnerships. So first being national stakeholders. I mentioned that we're pulling the ask lever. All of our national stakeholders are giving this resource for free. So those are College Board, that's ABC Mouse, it's Generations Online, it's content providers, it's ISPs. But how can we work with them to really make sure that we understand how to best use their resources? And we recognize that some of our national stakeholders aren't necessarily available on the ground. So I talked about open source before. We really believe in the train the trainer model. How can we get that information to PHAs as clearly as possible so that can be disseminated among the people who have the ear of the residents? And that's being translated down from national to the PHA, to PHA partners, and eventually to residents. So the second type of partner kind of bleeds right into that, local actors. So you guys mentioned how many people think resident engagement is hard. It's really hard. As you mentioned, families are busy. Sometimes you're not getting the level of engagement at events that you want to see. So we really focused on who are the local partners who also have the ear of those families. That's local schools, that's boys and girls clubs, it's local churches, sometimes it's local athletic departments, right? So we want to get as many cracks as we can at talking to students. Young folk, they usually don't listen on the first try. If you get them by the 4th try, maybe they come to their senses, right? So we wanted to have as many touch points as possible where they were hearing about these resources. And that included, parent engagement as well. I heard some questions about that in the last panel. So we were talking to schools saying, can you send flyers home in the backpack? Can we host events at back to school? Can we come and talk during an assembly? Things like that. But we were also saying, on back to school night, when you have the parents come in, parent-teacher conferences, can we put parents in front of the information on how they can be tracking their students' progress, how they can be more involved in the process? And even to PHAs, where it was, usually rent day or rental offices, they're only coming in for a short period of time, paying the rent and leaving. But even having the flyer there so they could ask the question, what is this? Well, come out to the event on Sunday, you'll hear more about it. That's been huge in some of our communities and really spiking that engagement by upwards of like 60%, just having that there on rent day, that they found out that was available to them. So last thing I want to talk about, and I promise I won't talk you guys ear off because I've got great information coming, is feedback loops. So it's easy enough to say, let's all do this work together. But for partners, we know everybody has their own metrics that they're accountable to. So while helping families is everybody's mission might be a little bit different, right? So the key part in collaborating with those partners is really having a coordinator person there. And usually that's the PHA. Honestly, you guys own the residents. But really working with partners to see what are the metrics you need to track? What are the outcomes you need to see? How can we create feedback loops within all of our organizations so that we're tracking those metrics. So it's beneficial to you to stay in this partnership and continue it down the line, whereas 2, 3 years, 4 years, 8 years. And how can we continue to see the outcomes, not only for our 16 to 20, but we want to know how they're doing once they get to college, right? We want to know that they're staying there. Are they graduating? Can we get success stories that really influence the next generation coming up? So those are the 3 partnership types I wanted to talk about here today. I wanted to talk a little bit about the story and the impact that we're having, because it's easy for me to get caught up in the administration and the numbers, but we want to talk about the impact. So this was an event we had with College Board in San Antonio this past year. San Antonio was one of the communities where we had the on-the-ground presence there. And this is Michael Johnson, our celebrity ambassador. He plays for the Cincinnati Bengals. And we wanted to really recognize some of the students who had went through the College Board training and were now college-bound. So on the left, we have Jackson, who was able to go through the College Board resources with San Antonio Education Partnership, which was the partner down there, was able to increase his score by 200 points. And he talked about how he's now going to McMurray University, I believe, in San Antonio on an athletic scholarship, but it was also able to qualify academically. Didn't even need the athletic scholarship. And then on the right-hand side, we have Seth, who was one of our public housing students who talked about how College Board resources and being able to talk with someone at his PHA and going through those steps really helped him to increase his score. He is also admitted to Trinity University in San Antonio, and it helped him to overcome his learning disability. So he was able to work through it anyway and really get that educational attainment that we strive for there. So with that being said, I hope that was a great introduction to you guys that have much more information to come. And I'll pass it to Farhad.
Hey, good morning, folks. Thank you so much for inviting us, Tess. I'm going to keep this first part of my talk somewhat brief because there's some great content, and then at the end, some of the tools and resources you're hearing about, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into those. So when Connect Home was created, then Secretary Castro reached out to David Coleman, the CEO of College Board, and said, hey, you guys want to partner with us? And we said, great, fantastic, we got a ton of free tools and resources. God bless you. And then HUD said, could you do more? Right? So then it came to the area where I live, which is called Access to Opportunity. It's College Board's intentional effort to increase the college enrollment of first-gen and low-income students on a national level. Why wouldn't we want to partner with public housing authorities, right? So we jumped in and we said, all right, first and foremost, we need to rely on the power of some of the resources we have, fill the communication gap. Our commitment to these students extends beyond the work of Connect Home, but Connect Home is a way for us to deliver these resources. Right now, what I want you to know is every student who resides in public housing in America is eligible for SAT fee waivers. And because of changes at the College Board, we want to make sure that students know that when they use a fee waiver, they have unlimited score sends to colleges, which is great. A lot of head nods, so you guys already know this. I'm preaching to the choir here. Additionally, we partnered with Khan Academy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later in the presentation, on providing a free SAT practice on Khan Academy. That's where the power of digital connectivity and online tools really matter. And then we have bigfuture.org, a best-in-class college planning site. Raise your hands if you're already using Big Future to some degree. Excellent, and I'm going to share some really good content there with you. And of course, the last bullet there about how to get started, we'll dive into a little bit later. But I want to talk to you for a few minutes why we developed the resources and the partnership with Connect Home the way we did. And it's the truth is, tools and resources don't mean anything if kids don't have access to consistent, caring adults. And I feel like the folks in this room represent that more than any place else. With respect to opening up opportunity for young people. Relationships are the key driver for these efforts. So as cool as I am, I'm a kid from New York, right? I don't know what's happening in DC or the Choctaw Tribal Nation, right? What we wanted to do is partner with NCAN, the National College Access Network, their members on the ground in 6 PHAs, train those awesome PHAs on Big Future and Khan Academy, but really recruit them on the basis of 2 criteria. One, they know college access, And two, they understand the residents of these communities that we want to serve. And that's what we did. Those icons, logos you see are of the organizations that we partnered with to deploy these resources. So we trained them in Big Future and Khan Academy, and then had them commit to provide 4 workshops. Obviously, academic preparation, take the most rigorous coursework possible and available. SAT practice, because improving that can mean the difference between a full ride or not. College search and application process through Big Future. And last but not least, a topic that's been covered a lot this morning, financial aid and scholarships, right? So that's what we offered the families, because part of it is also understanding that there's the reality is, as a former first-gen kid myself, I didn't know what I didn't know about college application, right? I still, 42, if you had me apply to college right now, I'd be in tears. But so how do we, strengthen that connection between what we don't know and what happens when you turn that light on for families and say, all right, this is the path. This is, again, you guys know this better than I do. Lastly, for us, it wasn't enough to then just do these workshops and say, good luck to you, right? They're getting connected. Now they're aware of what they need to do. We then supported the college access organizations we partnered with to provide 7 months of office hours on location in the 6 communities. And so that's the gist of it. I want to take you through a little bit later about Big Future and Khan Academy, but really turn it over to Angela and Byron so they can kind of talk about the details. There we go.
Hi, good morning. Is it morning still? Yeah. I'm Angela. My name is Angela Boogiong, and I was formerly with the College Success Foundation here in Washington, D.C. We served students in 8 high schools east of the Anacostia River. So if you know anything about D.C., you know that it is primarily low income. The schools, they've been on national television for the past couple of months. But before coming to DC, I also should say that I started my career in Trio in Los Angeles. I am from Los Angeles. I'm about to celebrate my 39th birthday. I'm still young, but I've been around. So I started with Trio in Los Angeles with Talent Search, and then moved to DC about 10 years ago. And now I am in New York with College Board. So I'm here to talk to you about not only our partnership with Connect Home, but also our just how to, that question, how do we engage with students? It's something that comes up all the time, right? How do we engage with residents on the ground? And Farhad touched on it, and also Amber touched on it a little bit. It's the relationships that you build with the residents, and more importantly, the families. I keep going back to this. It's like a holistic engagement of the families that really lead to success with engaging with the student. So this way. So I gave you a little background of just where College Success Foundation, what areas we served. The office actually is in the Shaw Howard area, so it was right off the metro. But the first year, so Connect Home is a 2-year project. The first year we were housed at the Southwest Family Center, and I believe Byron will talk about that a little. But the second year, we looked at participation the first year, and it was low. Mainly because we couldn't get residents from different properties at the Southwest Family Center. For numerous things, mainly because, as you know, there were maybe neighborhood property conflicts, and students, it was hard to get students to one particular property. So the College Success Foundation opened up their office, which is a really great office. It's also, they share space with with UNCF, with Teach for America. So it's very like-minded organizations. And down on the bottom floor, we had a college knowledge center. So it was equipped with technology, Wi-Fi. So it was a really great place. And then also the College Success Foundation they were launching a parent university, which we opened, which they, I keep saying we, but which they opened up to the residents of HUD, DCHA. So that happened this past year. And I guess we'll talk about lessons learned after, but there were a lot of lessons learned. One, like taking the service away from the properties, that was one lesson learned. I think that we needed to be at the properties, just because like there is a opportunity to collaborate. I think the theme is collaboration here. It's looking at like the different resources at one particular property and really engaging with those different organizations, the different partners, and looking to see really like who's the most this is a popularity contest, right? Which organizations are the most popular? Which people are the most popular, and connecting with them. The students are going to this one organization, this club, this person. I'm gonna see if I can collaborate, co-host an event with them. You know, and it doesn't even have to be college access related. Let's just get in their face, because I want to build a relationship with the students, the families. So I'm going to co-host, it could be with the athletics or with the coach, right? Co-host something to get them. And then the kids, they're naturally going to ask you, so what's your deal? Who are you? And then you're going to just organically engage in conversation with them and tell them all about the great resources and services that you have to offer at Project SOAR, right? And then they're gonna, you know, slowly trickle into your program. I think that is the one key tip. Of course, food, snacks, incentives, you know, but if you can't get the kids there, then those snacks, it's a budget waste. But so we need to get kids there. Create a student ambassador program. You're always gonna have one or two kids that are at your programs. Well, you can informally have them as your interns. They love that word. Oh, you can be my intern. Help me recruit. Oh, you know what? You can be a digital intern. Create a flyer for me that, you know, that will encourage students to come in, because I like to think that I'm young, but I don't know how to engage the students. I don't know what social media thing that you're using right now. So maybe you create some digital platform that engages students, right? And then they, of course, can help recruit and engage and bring numbers to your programs. So I think that's it. And then I'm gonna hand this off to Byron, and we'll talk more later.
Good morning. So just real quick, my name is Byron Pugh. I'm the Partnership and Community Relations Coordinator for the District of Columbia Housing Authority. Before coming to the Housing Authority, I did community engagement, partnership development, and resource coordination in Camden, New Jersey, and also in Baltimore, Maryland. So I have a fair amount of experience working with vulnerable and underserved populations. Each community is different, of course, but some of the approaches transcend communities and neighborhoods and states. So my first slide just gives a general overview of our office structure, and I'm not going to go into all the content on the slide, but what's significant is on the left side of the slide from where you're sitting, there is a manager who is in charge of our community navigators and our resident councils. If you can see that on your slide, I'm not sure if those screens have it. And then my role over here in partnerships in CVI. CVI is the District of Columbia's nonprofit, and that is housed within our Office of Resident Services, and I perform many of the roles of leadership for the nonprofit. And what we have an opportunity to do with our community navigators and our resident councils, serving under one manager, allows us to coordinate our programming, our resources, and have a very heavy presence, a very significant presence on the properties without necessarily the DCHA official staff or executive leadership having to be too involved on the property. A lot of the properties, depending on how they function, appreciate their autonomy, appreciate the right to make decisions related to services that are offered on their property, and the community navigators help assist with that, but resident councils make some of those decisions as well. The community navigators have several functions, and some of the key functions are engaging the resident councils as well as the residents, creating opportunities and partnerships, and enriching the lives of the youth, residents, seniors, and families. And largely what they're doing are the types of services you see listed here. Most of those are coordinated with providers that are either housed on the property or external providers that come onto the property to deliver programming. And then you see the types of support that are provided as well. Some of our navigators have specific training where they themselves can facilitate workshops, but most of our programming is performed by providers. There were comments from the panel about collaboration and partnerships, and that is extremely important. But one thing that we've found to be successful is some of the larger partners, some of the larger organizations, well-resourced, and larger name organizations do not necessarily connect at the property level. So some of your more effective providers and more effective organizations with engaging residents, or some of your lower capacity, smaller nonprofits, might even refer to them as mom and pop organizations. Some of them are resident-led, but they might only have 2 or 3 staff, but they may have been providing programming on the property for 10 years. And when we have about 43 properties that we manage, that's very, very useful to get the word out, to get messaging out, and to build trust, to work through those individuals that are on the property doing that. The next slide describes a day in the life of a navigator. So these are some of the things that a navigator might do as it relates to the property that they are responsible for managing. Each navigator has roughly 6 to 7 properties in their portfolio. So they provide these types of resources and support to the property. And one of the interesting developments that has happened this year was we hired a new director. And one of the things that director did was he relocated our navigators from our central office to the properties. So each navigator now has a primary office at one of the properties in their portfolio. And having that permanent presence on the property allows that navigator to build stronger relationships, to know residents by name, to recognize people, to know providers' performances on a much greater level, to get feedback, because partnership is important, but sometimes being able to identify exactly who to partner with on the property is very, very important. We have some properties that have 1 or 2 providers. We have some properties that our agency provides most of the programming and resources for, and we have some properties that have 7 or 8 providers. It depends on the size of the properties, the different types of services that are being offered, and the different needs of the property. But there may only be 2 providers on that property that we want to partner with as it relates to the College Board, because of who they serve and because of their ability to connect with that population. There was conversation about ambassadors, which can't emphasize the importance of that, but identifying the right ambassadors is extremely important. It's an overused term, but most people, I'm sure, are familiar with credible messengers. Identifying who the credible messenger is extremely important, because it might not be the highest performing, highest achieving young person, because they have a different reputation on the property potentially than some of the other credible messengers on the property. Identifying those credible messengers and getting them to support your programming and your resource and what you're trying to do is extremely valuable, even if they are not as engaged as some of the other youth in that program. But if they value it, then that message can be very, very powerful. Also, there are parents on the property that our navigators are able to identify that people listen to. And having that footprint on the property that, again, is not necessarily essentially associated with our central office or our property management office is really important, because sometimes we're not seen as an ally. So we have to work around that and understand that. And sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to process. And it was also mentioned by the panel of not really being able to connect the way with young people the way we might have when we were younger. And being able to honestly admit that and recognize that there are other people that are better at doing this work and finding ways to put them in a position to be successful is potentially humbling, but it's something that you have to do if you're committed to the work. We're getting older, and they just don't want to hear what we have to say sometimes. The next slide just speaks to some of the ways we engage residents, which I've mentioned, some of our strategies. What you see at the top are navigator facilitated engagement, resident council. We use them to promote our programming and activities. We will post information in the property manager's office and make it available there. Our providers and partners are critical, and resident-led promotion, I mentioned that as well. The next 2 are largely through our Office of Public Affairs. They will do e-blasts, text messaging. They will post stuff on our Facebook. They'll also use Twitter to get the messaging out. And when you have this type of comprehensive approach, you tend to get the message out, and then if you're providing quality programming, you will be able to build attendance and participation, and then that will take on a message of its own, and people will want to come out. So that's what we've seen to be successful. The formula doesn't always work, and it requires a tremendous amount of resources. The College Success Foundation partnered with our Connect Home leadership within the office, which is at the executive level, and we didn't have as strong of a partnership with them as we have with some of our other partners and some of our other grants. So one of our lessons learned is that we will make sure that we are all at the table as the planning is being rolled out. Sometimes when you have a 2-year project, it's a very ambitious timeline that you have, and the aggressiveness with which the program has to be rolled out and residents have to be engaged and programming has to start. Sometimes, I'm not saying that the planning isn't done as well, but you're also planning as you're delivering programming. So sometimes that puts you in a position where you're playing catch up sometimes. The last bullet is space, transportation, incentives, and food. And I'm sure everyone has given consideration to these elements. The one I want to focus on primarily is space. We are fortunate to periodically be able to take units offline and allow those units to be used by service providers. So instead of being used for dwelling, it's a non-dwelling unit for us. And we will either cycle multiple service providers through that space, use it as event space, or place a single service provider there, and they will be responsible for providing programming to the entire property, and that's programming often 7 days a week. It's programmed from sunup to sundown, sometimes well into the evening, depending on the needs of the property. And they're able to dedicate more resources to serving our residents because they are not dedicating resources to paying for space as they would on the commercial market. In addition to that, it gives them a permanent footprint where residents always know that this agency is going to be here. Most of the time, there will be somebody there. If not, there's emergency contact numbers and there's other information where they can get help. So that's important for us, again, because as an agency with 43 public housing properties, we can't sustain services and programming for all of them. So we have to find partners that are willing to have a permanent presence on the property, and the trade-off is we provide them with space. So that's pretty much a very quick run-through of what we try and do as an office to engage our residents and to partner with organizations. Thank you.
So I did want to pause here because I'm taking multiple takeaways from the conversation, one of which is you guys are a gold mine. This was a fantastic initiative, but they were doing workshops and they could do limited on-site advising. And the thing you're hearing every single person up here say is, I wish we had been on site more. I wish we could have been there day in and day out. And that's what you all are doing. So the power of presence, the power of your continued presence on these public housing sites is phenomenal, and I think will really continue to reap benefits. What I have really appreciated about your comments has been talking about partnerships and building partnerships, because we know we cannot do this work alone. So thinking about lessons learned, I would love to hear your thoughts, any of your thoughts about how do you start building a partnership? How do you make that initial contact with a supportive service provider or a potential partner and make the case to get involved?
So I guess I'll start with that. We take different approaches depending on the partner and the services. Sometimes if we're looking at a grant and there's elements of the RFP or the funding opportunity announcement that align with the work that we do, but also align with the work that other organizations in the city do, we will contact that organization to identify whether or not they want to partner with us on that grant application. If we are, through a needs assessment done on the property level, and we determine that there's a specific need, we'll reach out to an organization that provides that service. One of the things that we're doing now is working with a healthcare provider in the city to provide mobile medical services at a larger number of properties than we did previously. There were some smaller partnerships, but now we're looking at expanding it to most of our properties. And often they are very, very willing to partner and are trying to find a structured way to do it. Because with our properties and our partnerships, we have an office, my office, that's responsible for overseeing all those partnerships. All our providers report to us. They complete paperwork, contracts, and all of those things with my office. I'm responsible for that. So we have a systematic way of engaging them largely, so it's not difficult for us to reach out and try and build those relationships. I will also say that you do learn that there are some organizations, regardless of how successful they are off the property, they run into repeated challenges on the property, and they may not be a very good fit. We have a national organization here in the city that we worked with for a number of years, and it never connected. I mean, our properties have some crime, our properties have some distressed housing and space, and it's not easy for individuals who are used to a comfortable office to shift and put a permanent footprint on the property. So you have to identify the right organization that provides the right service if you're going to have them on site.
For the record, he's not talking about the College Board.
The last thing I'll say, and Angela mentioned this, and this is, it doesn't always seem like it's going to be as effective as it is, but making yourself available to the events the partners are doing. That are completely unassociated with what you're working on. But it shows your investment. It shows your true desire to serve the residents and not just to implement and roll out your project. And the residents see it, the partner sees it, and they will often reciprocate. Even if they don't, you're still engaging the residents, you are still being effective, you're still supporting a service or activity that's critical to the residents' self-sufficiency and health and well-being. But that's a very, very good way to build relationships.
Please.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say one thing I'll add, and I'll steal this from you, Byron, on your last bullet point there, where it's space, incentive, and food. What I found is working with a partner is just like resident engagement. I have to bring them to the table with something. And usually it's someone that I know who works at that organization who may not be the person I need to get it off the ground, but just inviting them out for a lunch and saying, hey, I just want to talk to you about the program. I'm not asking you for anything. All I'm asking is that you listen. And I think that's the first way to get people on the table is to have them buy into your mission before you ask them for something. They have to understand why you're doing it and why it's important before they're even willing to listen. We know they're all overworked, but we want to make sure that they care about what we're doing. And I think beyond that, having that first person believe in what you're doing makes it even faster to get to the person you need or the department you need. Because it's, as Tess mentioned, we were a pilot program. We were often building the plane as we flew it, just trying to stay afloat and learning those lessons the hard way. But one thing I'll say is a partnership is going to go a little bit slower in the beginning, but it's going to stay afloat longer in the long term if you're able to get to the right department as soon as possible. If you're able to get to the right engagement level as soon as possible. So that's one thing I'll add. As you're thinking about that space, that incentive, those food opportunities, inviting out partners just to see what you're doing, often a great first step.
So just two quick points. One, I want to underscore Byron's point about showing up to other partners' events. I think that's one of the successes we had on a national level with Connect Home. We showed up and talked to folks at various events. The other is also something that Angela and Byron talked about. Find the people in the orgs that your students are already connected with. It's a little bit different than showing up at other events, but find the orgs and the folks that are connected with, I think, in partnering with that. And last but not least, this is more in the engagement column, but this works with partnerships as well, the credible messenger piece. As I said, the College Board, yes, we have tools and resources, we have expertise, but we also, if you approach this from a humble position, you'll realize we aren't the best folks to deliver the services at the PHA level, and finding those trusted adults and trusted organizations and empowering them is a critical, what success we've had is, I think, built on the fact that we had that approach.
All right, I have one follow-up question, and then I'll open it up for y'all to ask. Byron, so we built these great partnerships. we have a lot of partners working on a public housing site, but sometimes they don't always play together well. So right? So what strategies have you all used to promote collaboration between different service providers?
So I guess the primary method that we use is provider meetings. So our providers on the properties, depending on the number of providers, we will have provider meetings on the property between all the organizations that are providing services to the residents. Depending on the number of providers and the type of partnership, either I will organize those meetings or the community navigator will organize those meetings. If I organize it, the community navigator attends, but the community navigator might organize a meeting if it's 2 or 3 providers, unfunded, that work off-site and don't have space or contracts with us to the same degree that some of the others do. But those meetings are very, very helpful. We have shared calendars of activities that they're required to provide to our property management office and our office that's in their license agreement to provide services to our residents. So we have access to all that information. We also have shared space, community centers on some of our properties, the Southwest Family Enhancement Center where some of the programming took place for the College Success Foundation. So we have ways of regulating their activity on the property, but we also try and stay very closely connected with them through provider meetings. We have the ability to remove providers from the property, of course. We have the ability to reduce access, increase access, reduce or increase funding. So we have additional mechanisms through which we can ensure that the relationships are as productive as we will need them to be, because our residents need that. They expect that and they deserve that. So we expect providers to commit to the work and produce.
So I want to take 1 or 2 audience questions and then let Fahad go through the resources that you all can utilize, and then we can get more Q&A. So Sonia, and let's get you that mic so we can capture your question.
This question is for Fahad. Can we get access to SAT fee waivers, and how can we go about being an organization without having to pay thousands of dollars, or I think it was $600 or so, whatever the agency membership was when we attempted? That would really help our agencies with affording that opportunity to our participants.
Of course. So first and foremost, you do not need to be a college member to receive fee waivers. Just want to dispel that. Obviously, the #1 source for your students to receive fee waivers are through their counselors at schools. That's the easiest way, empowering them to go ask for those. However, we do have a program where community organizations can apply to receive fee waivers. And as I said, any resident in public housing is eligible for fee waivers. So there's resources on the College Board website on how a community organization can become a fee waiver agency.
Okay, and just a caveat to that.
Please.
Thank you for offering. I mean, it is difficult for our participants to get SAT fee waivers because that's not the #1 choice of the test for college entry for our participants. So it is important for us, because when we've asked our participants to go and seek out a fee waiver from the guidance counselor, it's not given to them because they have a weight of how the student is performing in the school per se, in their area of excellence, and that's not always the case because the tests is totally different from ACT structure.
We applied as a housing authority, so I actually have the little blue forms to give to students because some of our students are not getting them from counselors or go to private schools as well. So
that's exactly the program.
Yeah, we had to show our budget and show that our budget was, so that had to come from our budget department, but it was a pretty easy application to be able to do, and you fill out how many you want. I don't know if it's going to be something we have to do annually.
No, once you're approved, you can receive them.
Yeah.
But when you get them, use them because they make the next year's allotment based on how many you used the previous year, which makes sense. So But
Which
yeah,
is
once
a
you're in,
problem.
you're
Our
in.
first year, we haven't been able to use as many because reaching out to kids, but yes.
And the customer service number is really great about sending more when you need them.
I will add that, so this year, this academic, or this spring, we rolled out the new SAT fee waiver policy. And once you use one fee waiver, they don't have to keep using another fee waiver to take another test. All the benefits load up into their College Board accounts.
Correct. So this was because, as again, formerly low-income and first-gen kid, we don't want kids to keep having to say, hey, I'm poor, I need a fee waiver, right? So we wanted to make this as seamless as possible. So not only does this apply for the SAT fee waiver, but also the CSS profiles with, again, the unlimited sends.
All right, and this will be our last question, then we'll go over those resources.
Mine is simple. When the participants were using the fee waivers, and when they registered to take the SAT or ACT, if they didn't, like a lot of times they went in and registered and then they went back and got the waivers later, but there was an expiration date on them, so they expired. So would like when you said you can keep using them and they don't over and over again, will there be an expiration date on it? And they have to
There's been conversations within the College Board about that. I'm at a disadvantage because I don't know how those conversations ended. But however, once the student receives them, they'll get more automatically. So the expiration issue might be.
So it's going to upload into their online account. So they're
Correct.
not going to have to use a fee waiver again. And even if they're like school day students, and if counselors click that they are fee waiver eligible, the student has to go in on their end, and this is where a caring adult will help, and say, yes, this is true, I am fee waiver eligible, and then they'll have the fee waiver benefits uploaded into their College Board account.
Also, what's this ACT you speak of? Never heard of it. So should I?
Yes, so let's go over some of the online tools, and then we can continue.
I'm hoping that it can get
Q&A.
projected on those screens as well. So what I wanted to do is take you through some of those resources in a quick format, and Tess and I have discussed offering a longer webinar so we can go through what these resources can mean for you. Also, just to underscore, as ed navigators, your role is critical to kind of helping young people take advantage of the opportunities they've earned. And that includes sometimes, unintentionally, College Board might throw up a barrier. So working in concert with you. You'll have my email at the end of this. If you run into issues, we will be helpful. And of course, you have experts in the room that have already navigated this process. So let's talk. Big Future. This is, first of all, Big Future is going through a comprehensive redesign to make it even better, faster, whatever the terms are for internet tools. And the feedback is coming from college access providers and students and counselors and parents as well. But on Big Future, you can develop, thanks to Angela's work on her team, we now have a college list generator as well, which is very robust. Of course, you have the traditional scholarship and college searches tools. But the one that I wanted to leave you with really quickly, at the bottom of the first page, you'll see the Education Resource Center. Anybody already use this? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Thumbs up, great. Amazing resources from handouts. There's a curricula on there in English and Spanish that you just download and you can implement with your families when you do the workshops that we've described or that you're already conducting. It's there. I'm a former, college access person myself. When you have a family sitting in front of you and you don't find the resource, what do? We make it up right then and there to support our families, right? I don't want you to have to spend your precious time making something that might already exist. We have it. It may not be perfect. We'll make it better with your feedback, but it's there. Don't reinvent the wheel. Focus on the kids and the families. There you'll have, again, lesson plans, case studies, presentations, tips, demos, all kinds of resources in the Educator Resource Center. You're going to love it. What I wanted to take a few minutes to do, and can you see the presentation on those screens? Should we get out the way? We're good? Excellent. I want to talk a little bit about the Khan Academy partnership that we have. Everybody should be using Khan Academy if you aren't already. But we, about 4 years, 3-4 years ago, partnered with Khan Academy when we redesigned the SAT. We wanted to make sure that we leveled the playing field, not just for that exam, but also for test preparation. Because what would happen is you redesign something, families with resources hire a test prep company, and they get that advantage, right? So we our psychometricians work with Khan Academy to develop free online a test prep that happens to be the best, in my opinion. So we have about, slides kind of coming out weird, but we did a study, and if students spend about 20 hours on Khan Academy, they can increase their scores by 115 points. And you know this better than I do. That could be a huge difference for kids, right? So what does that look like, right? Here we have 5 million people using the tool, 2 million linked accounts, and this is very important for us to remember. I'm not going to spend, this is a show-off slide. You can look at this later. Beautiful student quotes about what's happened. But the work is really around the linked account. So this is Tiffany. Tiffany takes the PSAT. PSAT, I think about 89% of American students take the PSAT. You link your College Board account, that's the one that we were all just talking about, with your Khan Academy account, and what it'll do, and don't ask me, I'm a youth worker, not a computer engineer, it provides Tiffany a personalized learning roadmap. It'll say, Tiffany, because of how you did, or these are the areas you need to study. This is designed for students to do by themselves. But my point, our point was like, I'm not worried about the kid that can go home and study for the SATs by themselves. We'll all be working for her one day, right? It's for all, for everyone else that may not have access to computers, may not have access to resources. This is why we built this tool, and we enhanced it with something that I'm going to share in a minute. There's also an app we can talk about a little bit, because I believe like 87% of Americans have access to a smartphone, even when they don't have access to broadband. Am I saying that fact correct? Excellent. And then, of course, continuous practice. Tiffany is successful. What does this mean? And you'll get these slides, by the way. If you remember nothing about these tools, I want you to remember these 2 links over here. SAT, actually how to link, the PowerPoint presentation, all of these are clickable, you'll get them. But basically go to satpractice.org, you link your accounts, and you send your scores. You might be thinking, what happens when my student has not taken the PSAT? There are diagnostics built in that they can take to get that personalization as well. Daily practice app. Don't worry, we're going to send you the slides. This is a related app to the Khan Academy tool. What's awesome about this is, let's say you have a paper. The kid takes a diagnostic on a paper. You can take a picture of it, and it'll actually instantly score it. Again, don't know how it works, but it works. It's fantastic. And you get those resources back to you in a very targeted fashion. Last but not least, so we've been doing this for a few years, right? I'm a community partnerships guy. I go to tell folks to stop spending money on test prep, use this, and they always ask, well, what kind of teacher view exists? Like I said, initially this was on the individual level, and we said, no, not really. And they're like, nope, I'm going to continue paying the test prep company to come in, because then I can blame them when things don't work. Now, last year we launched the coaching tools. This is an incredible resource that provides you with a vantage point to see how your students are doing, assign lessons, and now look at how they've done cumulatively. They used to reset every week. You can look at progress cumulatively. The students have to invite you. We'll talk about this in a second. But what's beautiful about this is we work with teachers to develop, I think, 36 lesson plans, math, reading and writing. Fantastic. And then, of course, this information right here will guide you through how you create your classrooms. If you're already using a Google Classroom, you can import that. If you're not, you can invite the students to select you as their coach and let you know. We got some head nods. People are already working on this. And then use the time you have with them to set up classes during your work with them. Last but not least, again, resources on how to jump right and do this. I like to say that incentives do work. We talked about incentives, make it fun. There's a great way to get students practicing. But the bottom line is, if your students practice 20 hours or more, they can increase their scores by 115 points, which can make a huge difference. All of these resources will be shared with you, and we'll schedule a webinar to take you. But this is what we brought to the table to try to level the playing field. But none of this works, in my opinion, if kids don't have access to you, right? And that's more head nods. So that's, I think that's it. And you have our emails.
Thank you. Those are great. So what other questions do y'all have? Ms. Royal?
Mr. Pugh, I would like to know if you have all the contracts in your Housing Authority come through your office. I'm just wondering if you guys have found a gracious way to require a substantial number of those vendors and contract holders to actively engage economically and financially with the residents, like hire the adults and give positions, training positions to the youth.
So I am not an expert on Section 3, but Section 3 requirements do require providers to hire residents. We also strongly encourage them based on what programming or services that they're offering, that there's value in it. Typically, we will partner with them for some of the marketing and promotion of their programming, and they will pay residents to do that. Also, our providers are required for maintaining their space. So some of the custodial and janitorial work that's done in their space that they utilize is done by residents that they hire. So we take a number of different approaches, and there are certain approaches where we can require it, and then there's others where it's just strongly encouraged. And they want to be successful, and they want to have space, and they want to have access to residents for a number of reasons. Part of it's their mission, but part of it is what some of them are funded to do. And we have a captive audience that can benefit from the programs that they provide. So the partnerships tend to work out pretty well, including with the hiring. I will also say, and we did talk about how we build partnerships, we're approached quite frequently by organizations to partner with us. We're aggressive in our partnership pursuits as well, but we are fortunate given that we are in DC and we have the number of properties that we have and roughly 50,000 customers. We are approached quite regularly by multiple organizations to partner and provide programming. And we make it clear that we expect our residents to benefit not just from the programming that's offered, but also as employees.
Anything else? Well, thank you all so much. Oh, and
Sure. Quick note, I would be remiss to say, if I didn't say that, if you guys are interested in Connect Home, if you like what you heard, our application is open for new communities. It'll be open until the 29th. Feel free to visit our website, read about the application. You have my contact information if you have questions about it. And then just a quick other note on open source. You don't have to be a Connect Home community to take advantage of the resources that we're offering. If you go to our website, there's a best practices page. We really believe in open source, so you'll find our playbook, chapters on devices connectivity, chapters on resident engagement. Feel free to take any of those lessons learned. You can also sign up on everyoneon.org for a URL that can help your residents get connected to low-cost internet services as well. And I know Farhad has offered a webinar, but I'll brag on him a little bit. He did a fantastic webinar for our communities about a month back. So if you guys are saying, I don't want to wait for that, I want to do it today, our YouTube channel is open source. So you can go view that webinar today if you wanted to.